Hello, welcome back to Unbelievable with me, your host, Andy Kine. Today we are in another school. We are somewhere in Aylesbury, and I've been joined again by two aficionados, I think, at this point of the show. Two returning, I was going to say heroes, but returning guests. On my left, we have Sam McKee, no stranger to Unbelievable. You've been a late bloomer with Unbelievable, Sam, but you've been on a few times now recently.
Yeah, I have. Hope you're not getting bored of me.
No, never. And Sam is something of a polymath. He's one of the most educated people in the UK. He wouldn't want me to say that, but I'm allowed to say it because it's my show. And to my right, I have Stephen Law again, who cannot get enough of this show. Welcome back, friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Stephen, I like to tease you slightly, don't know, by saying that you wrote the book on humanism, but you wrote a book on humanism.
I did, among other things. Yes.
Stephen, again, you'll know if you've listened to the show or watched the show a lot, Stephen is a very renowned and well-respected philosopher. Sam, again, is a philosopher, but a scientist, and difficult to know how to pin you down with your...
Scientist first.
Scientist first.
I haven't published in philosophy like Stephen has.
Well, neither have I, but I don't keep going on about it. So
they might have some of my books in the library because I've written books. So the Philosophy Files and the Philosophy Gym, for example.
Absolutely fantastic. Anyway,
I donated at least one of your books to this library.
So. Oh, then there definitely is one in the library. Okay.
That's very good. Anyway, the point is that they've both got good credentials. So we're talking today about the nature of belief, specifically in God. What can we know about belief in God and the nature of that belief? Can we know anything? Let's start with Stephen, because again, you're an old hand at this, although not physically that old. Please don't be offended.
I'm pretty old now.
You are. What can we know, if anything, about belief in God? So we're not talking here to start off with about what people do believe, but what is it possible to know? Would you start in the same place as Descartes, for instance?
Right. Well, I'll lay my cards on the table to begin with. So I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist, and I think it's possible to know that there is no Judeo-Christian God, for example. It seems to me extraordinarily unlikely that there is any such deity. We could discuss some other gods too, but I think he's going to be the main contender.
He's the main character.
The main character today. I think we can be pretty damn confident on the basis of the available evidence and information that we have that there is no such God. Why do I think that? Well, I don't think that there's particularly good reason to think that there is any such God. I mean, even if you thought that there was some kind of cosmic intelligence behind the universe, even if you were impressed by features of the universe and thought, golly, how do you explain that? That's really quite improbable that there should be these features, that the universe should have the Goldilocks property of being just right for life. Explain that. Well, I can't, right? And you might think, well, there must be some sort of intelligence behind the universe that designed it, that set it up this way. But even if all of that reasoning was good reasoning, which I rather doubt, that only gets you to some sort of cosmic intelligence, not to the Judeo-Christian God, which is something else, something much more specific. The Judeo-Christian God is a being that's supposed to be all-powerful or omnipotent, all-knowing, omniscient, and all good, supremely benevolent. And it seems to me that it's a huge leap from, there's some intelligence behind the universe. I'm pretty skeptical about that, but even if I was fairly confident about that, I still wouldn't give much credence to, and it's the Judeo-Christian God. And my main reason for doubt is what's known as the evidential problem of evil, that there's just so much pain and suffering in the universe over, literally hundreds of millions of years before we even show up. Animal suffering on a global scale. Absolutely unimaginable, appalling suffering. The idea that a supremely powerful and benevolent would create a universe like this, with that much seemingly completely pointless suffering in it, it's just, it's just it's beyond my ability to believe that. It's just not plausible. And then I find specific beliefs associated with the Judeo-Christian God, such as there was a man that lived 2,000 years ago. Well, that's plausible, but he died and came back to life, and I should believe that on the basis of not even eyewitnesses writing decades after the event. I mean, and this is good evidence. I'm supposed to, believe on that basis. I don't find any of that stuff terribly plausible either. I don't find the idea that we're all headed to one of two destinations, heaven or hell. We're all deserving of one of those. Actually, we're all deserving of the bad one. But by the grace of God, if you just, you get a get out of jail free card, if you believe, then you get to go to the good place. I find that ridiculous, frankly. So I'm not buying it, no.
Well, you've certainly laid your cards on the table there, Stephen, and they're not tarot cards because you're not superstitious in any way, are you?
Not very, no.
But that's good. And obviously the argument from gratuitous animal suffering is something that you've talked about before on the show, and we will come back to that. But thank you. That's a very strong opening statement. Now, Sam McKee, before we sort of ask you to respond to Stephen,
There's a lot there.
there is a lot there, and you can pick and choose. But what do we mean by belief? Are we talking here about having an opinion? Are we talking about something a bit deeper? Do you want to sort of speak lightly on that?
Yeah, so one of my favorite definitions of what it means to be human comes from Psychology Today, that says that we are meaning-seeking creatures. And if you think about that, especially with all our knowledge of mental health and awareness of those things today, someone without meaning will die, just like someone without water will die. It's just the way things go. In terms of things that make us different from other animals, other mammals even, we hunger and thirst for meaning. So I think it's very much hardwired in us to believe. I think that's evolutionary as well. You look at the kinds of statues and cave art you find some of the most ancient cave art you find in France. It features things like impossible creatures, things that are obviously not real, maybe the body of a bear with the head of a tiger, that sort of thing. So people have been religious or spiritual or seeking meaning since the very earliest days of civilization, the very earliest days of people living in community, those sorts of things. I think that it's just part of what we are. Christopher Hitchens once said that, it doesn't matter how much science and technology advances, people will still be religious. And I think he's probably got a point. It's just part of what it means. We look for patterns, we look for meaning. Having said all that, the late great Michael Roos, a wonderful philosopher of science who passed away last year, he said on this show actually that he thinks the God hypothesis is a serious answer to a serious question. It's not just something we should ridicule. It is a serious hypothesis. It's an attempt, whether you think it's rational or not, to answer a very real question. And it's an answer that people have come up with a lot. So there we are. I think belief is hardwired in us. I think it's part of what makes us human as opposed to other creatures. And it is a serious move.
Yeah, wonderful. I want to pick your brains on evolutionary biology in a bit, because that's one of your majors. But we'll go back to you, Stephen. So in your opening statement, you were saying, okay, I can sort of concede a sort of deism, the idea of a blind, or I may, if forced.
No, I'm not.
You're not even going to do that?
I'm not. No. But let's just talk about the big guy, God.
Okay.
Let's talk about him.
The guy with main character syndrome.
I'm not letting any of these beings in, actually. But you need other arguments to deal with those. So let's just focus on the Judeo.
Yeah, you park the bus, you go for it.
Yeah. But so what's the question?
Oh, well, I don't know. I had a question, then you said no.
Okay.
I was trying to distinguish for the audience the difference between sort of theism and deism.
Yes, so you could believe in many different things that are godlike. Mm-hmm. And in fact, belief in, and Sam was kind of alluding to this point, that belief in sort of extraordinary hidden beings, hidden agents with their own beliefs and desires that are working behind the scenes. That is absolutely ubiquitous. There is no culture on the face of the earth ever where you don't find people holding beliefs a bit like that, which is very striking and very interesting. That doesn't mean that they're true, of course, but it's very, very, and there's a wide variety of beings that are put behind the curtain. So you get people who believe that their dead relatives are in the room with them. You get people who believe in nature spirits. You get people who believe in demons or angels or guardian angels or sort of trans-dimensional aliens visiting us. And then you get gods of this and that variety. You can believe in a sort of morally neutral God. You can believe in a team of gods. So you can have a pantheist belief. You could believe in just two gods, a good one and an evil one, like the Manichaeans did. St. Augustine, before he was a Christian, was a Manichaean. He believed in, roughly speaking, two gods, a good one and an evil one, in some kind of cosmic battle. That's another hypothesis you could entertain. And it's really very interesting. Why are we so hugely prone to believing in beings like that? And there are, and you mentioned evolutionary psychology, so there are some, so it's not in dispute that we are super disposed to believe those things. The question is why? And a leading hypothesis is the HADD hypothesis, or hyperactive agency detecting device hypothesis. So that goes like this. You all have, or perhaps you all are, hyperactive agency detectors. You detect agency. You're doing it now. You know there's an agent over here, a being with beliefs and desires that's communicating with you. We're super sensitive to other agents in our environment. And the reason for that is that when we were evolving, on the savannah or whatever, if you were to miss an agent, that would be potentially very bad news, because that could be a rival, a thief, a predator, could be a saber-toothed tiger. If you miss agents, it can be extremely costly and take you out of the gene pool. You don't get to survive and reproduce because you weren't sufficiently attentive to the agents, right? If you were to over-detect agency, on the other hand, well, you don't lose much probably. It's not terribly costly. And so natural selection has selected for people who err on the side of over-detection. They're more likely to survive and reproduce. And so we over-detect agency. We see agency where there is none. If you are not sure why something's going on, why does the planet Mars move in that weird way across the sky, retrograde? Well, it must be an agent, right? So immediately you've got an explanation. Why did my keys end up on the sofa when I was sure I put them on the mantelpiece? Gremlins. There must be gremlins in the house, invisible agents that are operating behind the scenes. So once you've posited an invisible agent, you can explain anything you want explaining. Any mystery is solved immediately by just sticking the appropriate agent back there. And so, we just go to town on projecting agents out into the world, even where there aren't any. And we know that we're horribly prone to over-detecting. We know that we're constantly believing in these things and they're just not there. And the beliefs have been debunked even. Yeah. So,
and does this work on a low level as well, seeing shadows in your bedroom at night and thinking it's a person?
Exactly that, yes. No, you can't turn it off. So if you're walking home and you hear a rustle in the bushes, boom, HADD turns on immediately. You'll think there's someone there, okay? And you can't turn it off. That's a product of millions of years of natural selection operating on you. And even if you can't then see an agent, you might still feel that nevertheless there's one there. That would be an invisible agent. And so this is the sort of naturalistic explanation for this particular tendency that we have to believe in this extraordinary range of invisible beings operating.
I think it's more than that as well, actually. I wrote an article on this, which comes out tomorrow in the Institute of Art and Ideas, that our brains evolved for survival, not to tell us the truth. And that's part of the thing with religion. It also has obviously a massive social benefit, a communal benefit. If you bind together over shared beliefs that you think are true, it's a perfectly evolutionary explanation for religion and why it's thrived and why it's helped us survive. I don't think it explains it away completely, just for a couple of reasons. I mean, this is controversial, but it looks likely that Homo naledi buried their dead. And if that's true, then religion in some rudimentary form could be over 100, 200,000 years.
For the benefit of people watching, including myself, who don't know what that group is.
Ancient hominins.
Oh, right.
Neanderthals also buried their dead with artifacts, which looks, again, it's contentious, talking to Simon Conway Morris about this, but it looks like it could be a rudimentary form of ritual in some sort of spiritual way. Again, talking maybe 100,000 years ago. So a religion can be as ancient as people, but it's a survival benefit. It says nothing about whether or not it's true. But what if part of this is, what C.S. Lewis talked about as an instinctive reaching upwards? Stephen's right, it's ubiquitous everywhere, that we are hardwired to search for something, that we are reaching for something. Lewis thought that Christianity was the true myth, so to speak. But if we're meaning-seeking creatures and evolution is part of our long history, I wonder if you'll indulge me for a second, give an analogy from a story. Sir Arthur Eddington, amazing astrophysicist who I did my doctorate on, was at Cambridge. He's the scientist who proved that relativity was correct by taking photos of the solar eclipse in 1919. He was a Quaker, and if you guys know about Quakers, pacifists, but a very mystical kind of religion. They're very non-dogmatic, so they're very different from your Catholics and your Protestants.
But they used to quake in the power of the presence of the Lord. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, spiritual experience, that sort of thing. So Eddington was talking about people come into his observatory and look through the telescopes, and they would see the rings of Saturn, or they'd see stars in their glory, and they would look back at him and they would say, Psalm 19 verse 1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies show the work of his hands. And he said he and his colleagues would roll their eyes, sort of go, oh, okay, and I share Stephen's lack of being impressed with design arguments and scientific arguments for God. That's not what I'm about at all. And someone said, well, what about you? What comes to mind when you look through your telescope and you see the rings of Saturn and you see the stars and their glory? He said a very different Bible passage comes to mind. And he retells the story of Elijah in the cave from 1 Kings. And he says, Elijah's in the cave and God says he's going to show his glory. And there's a great mighty wind and God is not in the wind. Then there's a great earthquake and God is not in the earthquake. And there's a roaring fire and God is not in the fire. And afterwards comes the still small voice. What are you doing here, Elijah? And Eddington says, there you have a meteorology and God has nothing to say in meteorology. You have seismology and God has nothing to say in seismology. You have thermodynamics or whatever it would be for fire. And God all passes by in silence. But afterwards, for the scientist, comes the voice, the inner voice saying, what are you doing here? Why am I here? What's it all about? He said the cry goes up from the heart, whether you're doing science or whatever research. What is it all about? What's it for? Why? And the why question is what remains, what lingers, what drives us. And I think it's that hunger, that thirst that causes us to reach upward, and it isn't satisfied with trite answers. It isn't satisfied with stuff that doesn't fulfill. And I think that's where you separate maybe an evolutionary communal building, survival benefits sort of explanation for religion. It's an explanation, but it doesn't explain it away. You still have that reaching, that striving, which is ubiquitous everywhere.
Thank you, Sam, because it's an interesting one, because you're not from Christian background, particularly, as in you're an adult convert, aren't you?
Yeah, my relationship with faith is quite complicated and has been for a while. I do have a very clear memory of there being no way back for me with atheism when I was going through a lot of depression and had some mental health problems. I sort of have a deconversion story from atheism. But I don't know if we want to get into that.
Well, I'd like to, but maybe we
might want to respond.
We need to bring our old friend Stephen Law back in. Stephen, feel free to respond if you feel that there's something.
Well, yeah, there are things I could say a little bit about that. So I think that I would be a little. I'll say three brief things. Okay, so that you might find stimulating. So the first thing is this: people often say, well, you, Stephen, you need to show a little humility. You know, you arrogant so-and-so, coming here and telling us that there is no God. How could you know such a thing? You know, there are more things in heaven and hell, than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio, is the famous quotation that gets wheeled up from Hamlet. And I just want to deal with that first. I think we should show a great deal of humility and admit when we don't know things, but that doesn't mean that we can't know things, and in particular know things about some sort of supernatural domain. I think people often think that the supernatural is off limits to scientific investigation, to observation, and it's true that you can't directly observe God, but there are plenty of things that you can't directly observe that you can scientifically investigate. And the reason that you can do that is because if the things behind the veil have observable consequences, you can have a look and see if those things are there or not. So, for example, no one's ever going to see an electron. They're too tiny. But we can be pretty confident that electrons are there because, you know, we've got the bubble chamber results and so on, the experimental results that point pretty heavily in the direction of the existence of electrons. Now increasing evidence for the Higgs boson. No one's ever seen one, but we've got increasingly good evidence that it's there. Other things we thought were there turn out not to be, you know, phlogiston and substances like that. So just because something is invisible and intangible doesn't mean you can't scientifically investigate it. And that means that you can investigate supernatural claims. A friend of mine, Professor Chris French, Professor Emeritus now of anomalistic psychology at Goldsmiths University, he did loads of scientific investigations of paranormal claims, whether people can find things using dowsing rods, for example. Petitionary prayer, if you pray for somebody, will that have a medical benefit for them? So there were huge multi-million-dollar studies that were done on this, several. The first one was run by somebody who believed that prayer worked. And so they got a big group of people in hospital suffering from a heart complaint, divided them randomly into two, got half of them prayed for, the other half not prayed for, and then no one knew who was being prayed for and who wasn't. No one knew who was who and so on. So the thing was randomized. And this established pretty conclusively that petitionary prayer doesn't have that kind of medical benefit. It wasn't just an absence of evidence for the benefit, it was evidence of absence. There ain't no such thing, it doesn't work, right? That's not to say that prayer never works. I mean, maybe there are other ways in which prayer might work, but it doesn't have those kind of effects. And we did the science, and we established that pretty conclusively. So it's just not true that you can't investigate these things. If there's, consider the hypothesis that there's an all-powerful and supremely malevolent, evil God, just the one God, and this is his creation. Who believes that? Why? Nobody, obviously. Why? Well, look out the window, you know, love and laughter and ice cream and rainbows and way too much good stuff for this to be the creation of a supremely powerful and cruel and malevolent. This should like a hellscape, right? We should be permanently in agony, and yet, you know, we get Haagen-Dazs and we get puppies and we get rainbows and we get a lovely view, and it's just not the kind of world that a supremely powerful and evil deity would create. If he's back there, there are certain things you should observe this side of the curtain, and when we look, they ain't there. It's not bad enough for this to be the creation of an evil God. So I think we can cross that deity off our list of likely candidates. Maybe there's a God back there, but it's not that one. For much the same reasons, you can cross out the good one too. too much pain and suffering in this world on this side of the veil for there to be a good God on the other side. So that's dealing with the humility point, so I am going on a little bit. I think that we're often told that we have a God-shaped hole in our hearts. You know, there's something there that's missing, and only God can really fill that for us. And I think a lot of that's down to the power of suggestion. I think we are naturally curious. We do naturally ask why questions. I'm a philosopher. I've been asking those kind of questions. I've always wanted to know, why is there something rather than nothing? Where did right and wrong come from? Could a computer think? Could a machine think? Am I living in the Matrix? How can I tell? You know, these are really interesting, fascinating questions about meaning and morality and what's going on, reality, the nature of reality. You can be interested in all of that stuff and not believe in God. I think personally that God provides trite answers to those questions, pretty implausible and really not terribly deep answers actually. I think that the power of suggestion is incredibly powerful. Sometimes people think that they can see things that are there, and if you tell them that they're there, it seems even clearer to them. An example would be an astronomer called Lowell, who had a telescope through which he was looking at Mars, and he could see lines on the surface. And others looked through their telescopes. There was an Italian, Schiaparelli, I can't remember his name, who could see these lines. And they started mapping them. Others joined in, and they would draw these lines. And even in about 1960, there's a map of Mars produced with these lines on it, full colour map. You go online, you can find the map with the canals of Mars. They were thought to be canals. That was the hypothesis, that these were man-made trenches that had been dug into the surface of Mars to bring water from the polar caps to the arid central areas. Lots of scientists really believing that these things were there. They believed they could see them with their own eyes through a telescope. Then the telescopes got better, and then we had Voyager and other probes that actually went over there and took photographs of the surface. They're not there. They never existed. It was an illusion. People convinced themselves of the reality of something, even scientists, trained scientists, convinced themselves of the reality of something that wasn't there, partly because they're predisposed to find lines in things. It's just kind of a natural thing that we tend to do, but also the power of suggestion. If you tell somebody you've got a God-shaped hole in your heart, and if you just really believe, you'll find that it's filled, people are going to go, yeah, you know what? I really do have a God-shaped hole in my heart. And wow, and now I believe in Jesus. Wow, it's filled. And my life is filled with, people are going to believe it.
Yeah. Although not suggestion. And I think that's absolutely right. And it's that nephelocockagia again, isn't it? Seeing face in the clouds. That's the technical term for seeing face in the clouds. But none of the people that you debate against, there are no sort of Christian academics who are saying to their audiences, you have a God-shaped hole in your heart. So
I've debated people that
you have
taken that line. Yeah.
I won't take that line.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, let's see what line.
I did a debate with Professor Richard Swinburne. He was a sensible guy. I like him. But also the local reverend at Durham University. It was a debate society, and we were debating the existence of God, and so Swinburne predictably went with the arguments, and that's all great. But the Reverend sort of pushed the arguments to one side, and he said, deep down, and the room hushed. Deep down, we all know, don't we, that there's something missing from our lives, and if you just take a moment and think, you can feel it there, and that's what I mean by God. And all the Christians were going, how deep that is. That really resonated with them. And is that going to persuade an atheist in the audience? Probably not. But the reason these debates are very often had, including probably this one, being a bit cynical at this point, is not to convince atheists, it's to shore up the faith of the believers. That's why we're doing this. To make people think that it can't be that ridiculous, as ridiculous as I think it is, and to reassure people that there is something to it and you really ought to be taking it seriously. And this is one of the ways in which it was done, at a debate, the God-shaped hole. It's a classic.
Well, let's go back to Sam and see what line he takes, because I'm fairly convinced, before you even answer, Sam, that you would find that local Durham vicar's response trite and facile. Yeah. So you can respond.
Yeah, I share a great deal of agreement with what Stephen has said, and I think what Stephen has said could rule out 99% of people's spiritual experiences or basis for belief. My problem is the 1%, and like I said, I want to acknowledge the truth in what Stephen has said, but I also don't want to diminish the very real meaning crisis and things that we were talking about earlier, which do play a role. There is a human instinct to search and to reach, and I think Neanderthals burying their dead with artifacts and a rudimentary spirituality were doing that long before evangelical preachers and vicars were convincing them that was the holy and sacred thing to do. I found myself very, very cynical about religious experiences until I had one in the lab at Cambridge 7 years ago that kind of knocked my socks off. And I've been through a lot of therapy. I don't want to say that it's just I've tried everything I could possibly think of to explain away what happened to me in the lab that day. And ultimately,
it wasn't the good helmet.
No, it wasn't. Okay, right. I was researching green algae in a lab, not at all looking for anything God-wise. I hadn't been to a church for about a year at that point. I didn't despise church, but I had absolutely no desire to go. It was not a very healthy thing for my life at that point. But I just I did my best with it, but something happened that day. I was talking with the atheist Harry Amos, who you've had on this show.
Oh, we like Harry, yeah.
Yeah, and I relayed the story to Harry with Ruth Jackson. Ruth said to Harry, as an atheist, what do you think? What's your explanation for what happened to Sam? And he said, and credit to Harry for this, he said, I have absolutely no explanation for what happened to you, but I'm just really glad that it did. And that's sort of like, okay, yeah, that's a healthy way of looking at it. I don't know for certain. It wasn't the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It wasn't the risen Christ, a vision from heaven. I just had this very, very powerful physical, spiritual experience while I was in the lab at Cambridge studying algae, and I have no explanation for it. The whole thing, well, why you a Christian then? Why I'm most at home at a church with candles and liturgy and stained glass windows, and that's sort of my happy place these days. A lot of quiet, a lot of silent reflection.
I like to be left alone as well.
Yeah, those sorts of things is where I'm most at home. Why I am a Christian is, out of that, is two reasons, I think. Firstly, it was the most personal experience of my life. It was a deeply, deeply personal experience. So if there was a divine hand reaching to me, it was a personal one, not an impersonal one. Secondly, I have a lot of sympathy for what Albert Einstein said on this. In 1932, Einstein is interviewed about his thoughts on religion. Einstein, obviously not conventionally religious at all. He said he sort of believed in Spinoza's God, was how he put it, a very sort of deistic, impersonal mechanism behind the universe, if any at all. But he did add this caveat. He said, but I'm enthralled by the figure of the Nazarene. And he's not the only person who said something like that. Gandhi famously said, I don't like your Christians, I don't like your church, but I do love your Christ. You Christians are so unlike your Christ. Yeah. And I sort of,
don't you, Stephen?
At this point, I look at it and think, well, if I'm following anybody, and I'm not stupid enough to follow myself, Richard Feynman, one of the great scientists, my science hero, said, there's no one so easy to fool as yourself. So I don't buy into this whole just follow yourself, follow your heart. I will fool myself all the time, 365 days out of 365. If I'm going to follow anyone, I'll follow that guy. Was sort of where it came to. And those two things aligned and probably saved my life, but also put me back on a path of going back to church again and taking it seriously.
But also it hasn't discounted you from the hard work of thinking, your academic journey, most of your qualifications have come since then, haven't they?
Yeah, certainly. I share Stephen's repulsion for trite answers.
Yeah.
Don't give me any nonsense. Don't give me something that obviously doesn't work. Let's not shut the book. First and foremost, I'm a scientist. Let's actually dig into what's real, what's true, and just don't give me a answer that closes investigation down, which is why I don't have any patience for intelligent design. I think Christians are. Sorry, I am on the religious side here, by the way. So, but Christians, I think, overestimate the philosophical arguments for God's existence immensely, and they overestimate those arguments. I think atheists underestimate the historical strength of first century Christianity and that. So it can go both ways. But let's not be impatient or foolish. Ultimately, what we want is what's true. Blaise Pascal, is Blaise Pascal the guy who did the hole in the heart argument? I can't remember if it's him.
The God-shaped hole?
Yeah.
I don't remember him talking about God-shaped holes, but anyway,
No,
yes.
I'm confusing with someone else.
Oh, the heart has its reasons of which reason knows nothing. I think, did he say that? He might have said that.
Pascal is interesting because he's a great scientist in his own right, and an interesting writer and a great philosopher. But Pascal is wrestling with his doubts at one point, and he's fiercely looking at the arguments for God's existence, trying to find some consolation in them, not finding a lot. But then Pascal has this night of power, and he writes in his journal, fire from heaven, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And he sort of goes, the thinking philosophical stuff just sort of goes out the window. And I have wrestled with, is my reason for belief based on a religious experience, is it rational? My honest answer is, I don't know. I don't know. I can't say for certainty that it is. It's not easy for me. The scientist in me doesn't like it. I don't like it. But was it real? Yes. Was it the most real thing that ever happened to me? Yes. Was it personal? Yes. Did it save my life? Probably. And so there is a point where like conviction and meaning meet. And on the one hand, I have Michael Roos saying the God answer is a legitimate answer. It's a serious answer. I have the academic historians and theologians and philosophers who I look at and I respect and say, I think you're onto something. This isn't foolishness. And then you have the rubber hits the road, real life experience. Meaning matters. Am I going to throw myself off the motorway bridge, or am I going to go back to church? That sort of thing. And you find actually here is maybe where the truth with a capital T, the meaning with a capital M, actually works. Sir Arthur Eddington said that physicists, we often forget that the real, actual, lived-in world is the world that we live in. And we get too abstract, and I like that. I agree with him on that. There is a real world with a capital R, and it needs real answers. And sometimes we find those answers in places we don't like or we don't expect. And it still it cobbles together to make up a good reason to believe.
Brilliant. We're going to take a short break while the audience get their questions ready. You're watching and listening to Unbelievable with me, your host, Andy Kind, and my guests, Dr. Stephen Law and Dr. Yet?
Not yet.
Not quite.
A couple of months.
Soon to be, in 2 months, Dr. Samuel McKee. Stay tuned. Let's start with our questions then. We've had an amazing question from the back of the room, directed at Sam. Sam, you and Stephen seem to agree on a lot of things. And again, you're not terribly amenable to a lot of Christian apologetics, and yet you are a Christian. You do follow Jesus by your own admission. So given that you agree with Stephen on so many things and are cynical about lots of the things that he's cynical about, what is the definition of the God that you believe in? What, in terms of your actual belief, what is that 1%, if you like?
Okay. So I suppose if I was to describe the characteristics of that God, it wouldn't look too different from the omni-God that you probably learn about in A-level RE. In terms of attributes and necessary characteristics. To simplify it a bit, I guess this God must be personal, from my own experience, someone who is actually deeply interested in individuals and people, and I would have to put Jesus in there. Jesus would be God in human form, God incarnate for me as well. There's something about him for the reasons that I said earlier, but Jesus would have to fit at the start of my definition of God as well. But in terms of just describing what that God must be like, it would be the omni-God, as Philip Goff and others sort of call him.
Great. Do you want to respond to that? There's not necessarily a lot for you to respond to there, Stephen.
No, I think it's
we could just move to the next question. Next question, another fantastic question here. Some of the best questions we've ever had in our schools debates are unbelievable, and I should know. Sam, it's directed to you again. Sorry to make you bear the burden of all of this. You said, and Christians in general would say, that it's God that gives them meaning. Does that mean, by association, that atheists are lost because they can't find meaning? I think I know what you're going to say here, but that's the question. Do atheists lack meaning, or are they lost because they struggle to find that meaning?
No, great question. No, of course not. Of course, atheists live happy, meaningful lives just as much as, if not more than, a lot of their religious counterparts. I will go with my favourite answer on this is from, again, one of my favourite philosophers, Michael Roos, who I mentioned earlier, brilliant philosopher of mind, philosopher of science who passed away last year. He said that, of course, you can cobble together meaning, lots and lots of meaning from lots of different things to enrich your life and ground it and make it fulfilling from your birth to death. But he said, if you're looking for ultimate meaning, meaning with a capital M is what he called it, capital M meaning, then you do need a God for that. You need something ultimate that's bigger than humans, bigger than humanity, bigger than the world, to ground, underpin, and overarch your story. What Roos, who was an atheist, felt was that was not more powerful or better necessarily than lots and lots of little m meaning. I find meaning in my sports, in my family, in my friends, in my hobbies, my activities, my interests, my activism, my other beliefs. You can, for Roos, you could cobble together lots of little m meaning and live your life fulfillingly as an atheist, and that was what he did. And that's, the story of the existentialists as well in lots and lots of ways. But Roos said, if you're looking for capital M meaning, you need God. I think I'd agree with him on that. You can live a meaningful life with lots of little m meaning, and that will add up to a meaningful life just as much as a religious person. But if you're looking for the ultimates, the universals, then you'd need God. I'd agree with his position on that.
Stephen, you're writing some notes there.
Yes. No, obviously I think you can lead a meaningful life in the absence of God and religion. So we're in agreement again. I'm not sure, though, that I agree that it's only with God that you get ultimate meaning, because I'm not. I would need some convincing that God can deliver ultimate meaning.
He would have to be real in order for him to do that.
Yeah, but even if he's real, I'm not sure. I mean, what do we want God to do there exactly? What is it? I mean, it's kind of just assumed that, oh yeah, if there's a God, then our lives have ultimate meaning. Why? What is ultimate meaning, and why would our lives have it if there's a God? Can you just spell that out for me? And that spelling out often you don't really get. There's just some hand waving. When it is spelled out, people say, well, God created you. So what? I mean, my parents created me. That doesn't make my lives meaningful. But he created you to love him. Well, suppose, I discover that a child discovers that their parent had them for the purposes of loving them, for that entirely selfish reason. Would that make their lives meaningful? No, it would make it less meaningful, probably. So what does God making me to love him make my life meaningful? It's kind of weirdly baffling. Yeah, these are sort of stock answers that get trotted out. Or, your life is only meaningful if, you last forever. Why? Why is a longer life more meaningful than a shorter life? Often it's the shorter lives that are more meaningful. Why does it going on and on and on and on without end give it greater significance or meaning? You never really get a good answer to any of these questions. So although you get these sort of, like a mantra, it's wheeled out that, God would make your life. Would he? And why would he?
Yeah, because obviously, God is just the word God is just a word, and in order for us to say God gives us ultimate meaning, we have to clothe that idea of God with some characteristics, don't we? So,
I'll try. I'll try to venture, and it may satisfy you or not. It does depend on the kind of question that you're asking. Let's go to some of my favorite atheists here. Bertrand Russell talked about in billions of years, the sun is going to explode and engulf the entirety of the solar system, and everything humans have ever built, ever thought, or ever done, any trace of life that we know of, is going to vanish. And he said, all the art we've ever built, all the songs we've ever written, all the music we've ever made, all the love we've ever loved, all of it is going to disappear without a trace and be gone from the universe. And so he says, this is at the end of his book, A Free Man's Worship, only on the foundation of unyielding despair can human meaning be built. And that's kind of a cold, dead, horrible way to look at it, but it's not too dissimilar from, I mentioned the existentialists a moment ago. Albert Camus said, at every turn, the absurdity of life hits you in the face. It does. When we really drill down into it, it doesn't matter what I've done in my life. It's all going to fade away. It's all going to go. Everything I've built, it doesn't matter how I live my life. It's all going to come to an end, a dead, cold end, a meaningless end. No matter how much meaning I try and make my life out of, everything is going to end in nothingness. And when I think about that, we will just sort of go, oh, that's kind of a bit rubbish. But we don't live our lives that way. We don't find satisfaction in that. There's not a good enough answer to that, except for a love that's bigger than that, a permanence that's bigger than that, a life with a capital L, meaning with a capital M. That's I think the best attempt at an answer.
But that's just the point I made about, if it doesn't last forever, it's meaningless. Why? I mean, why can't finite existence be meaningful? Why does the fact that it doesn't go on and on and on and on without end mean that it's not? It lacks meaning. I don't really understand the argument for that. I'm not sure that there is an argument for that. It seems to me that very often, the atheist that lays down their life for another human being, believing that that's it, makes a more meaningful sacrifice than the Christian who thinks that they're going to go to heaven as a result and have eternity with God. It's a more meaningful and more significant. It's more meaningful than Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, ironically, because even Jesus.
There's the headline.
You knew he was coming back. 3 days off, and I'm back. Right? The atheist that lays down their life for another human being, knowing that that's it, makes the more meaningful sacrifice, so far as I'm concerned, more meaningful even than Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. So I just don't get this idea that, if it doesn't last forever, it's not meaningful. It's not true.
I agree with you in part. I agree, the philosopher in me agrees with you. I just don't think that's the real world that we live in. It's not like a real felt reality. We're looking for more. We're asking for more. It's just not like it's this rubber hits the road stuff I'm talking about. Actually, that we do need to know that it means something. We don't live our lives kind of operating that way where, I can just be here one day, gone the next, and that's fine.
Well, no one's saying it's fine.
No, of course not, it's fine. I don't find it satisfactory in the actual world that I live in day to day. It's a good philosophical answer. It doesn't change me though.
And so the Christian might say, and again, you're agreeing. Sam is agreeing with Stephen that you can find little meanings, little m meanings in life, and those are perfectly valid in terms of the confines of this physical life. I suppose what Sam, a Christian might say, a Christian sort of apologist might say, is that the claim of Christianity, if we're looking at the big M of meaning, the ultimate meaning, the claim of Christianity is that we do not simply stay or exist within a materialistic universe. And three of the words that describe God, three of the nouns that describe God in the New Testament are love, light, and life. So the claim is that he is love, he is light, he is life.
Yeah, we should swap chairs maybe.
No, I don't think we should swap chairs because I like being close to Stephen's mascot. Look at this. We found this on the teacher's desk.
We basically, if you go sociologist for a second, we construct stories through which we live our lives. We construct narratives that we live out. We need an overarching narrative to live by, an overarching story, and it ties into this meaning thing. I think the Christian answer of what reality is, the Christian overarching story, corresponds more with the actual world that I live in than the atheist one.
Including heaven and hell.
Well, I'll get in trouble with some Christians with how I answer that. But that's a whole other thing. I do have a sort of this is basically where I came to a dead end with atheism about 9 years ago when I went back to school. I did a course called The Big Questions of Philosophy as a new student with a professor from King's College. And at the end of it, I was just ashes. He was like the most joyful atheist professor I've ever met. He was like, "This is great. There's no God. There's no ultimate good or evil. There's no right or wrong." And I left that lecture series just in pieces. Like, why are you so cheerful about this? The world you've described as an atheist philosophy professor looks nothing like the actual world I live in. Your answer can't be true.
What would it look like if it was true?
Well, it would look like a world where capital M meaning exists, for a start. Because that's
a world in which atheism is true. What would a world like that look like?
Like more like the world of the existentialists.
I mean, how is this not a good fit for atheism?
I think it would look like Bertrand Russell's world. It would look like Albert Camus' world. It would look more like that.
Give me a feature.
Sisyphus.
If atheism is true, the world would contain pointless suffering of Sisyphus endlessly pushing his... But it is like that. Great fit.
It's not that the atheist story is implausible. As a scientist, I'm very attracted to materialism. I actually wish materialism was true. It would give me a sort of an arbiter of ultimate truth. It would make me a gatekeeper of it. I just don't think it's as true as the Christian one. There's that leap.
Atheism is not a good fit for how the world appears to you. And I'm just wondering what it is that's not a good fit.
It's all right. Maybe a bad choice of words on my part. It's not a horrendous fit, but the Christian fit is better. And the gap, as I put it, is putting it in philosophy terms. It's Kierkegaardian's it's the leap into the upper story where the metaphysical things are more true than even the physical ones that I know, like capital L love, capital L meaning, capital T truth, those sorts of things. The things that actually ground how I live as an independent, conscious, feeling, thinking being in this world. I need that leap into the upper story, and it's just that leap that the atheist account doesn't give me.
There's no truth if atheism is true.
No, there are truths. I'm just looking for capital T, like ultimate. I'm dealing in ultimate universals, not particulars.
We are out of time, unfortunately.
We could talk more about it.
I hate to leave you champing at the bit.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
Which is that people often, it's very much often to the advantage of religious people to confuse atheism with a number of other positions, such as materialism, scientism, all sorts of other isms. It's not any of those things. So as an atheist, you don't have to be a materialist. You could be a Platonist about mathematics and think there's some sort of non-natural world of numbers. But that is the view of some atheists. So the idea that so very often you get this caricature of the atheist, who's someone who thinks that there's just a material world and there's absolutely nothing beyond that. I'm not necessarily committed to that at all. I mean, maybe there's more. I'm open to persuasion. I'm just not persuaded that there's a supremely powerful and malevolent deity, because, look out the window. And I'm, for much the same reasons, I'm convinced that there's not a supremely powerful and benevolent deity either.
That's fair. Yeah, that's absolutely fair.
Absolutely fair. You've both spoken very well. Thanks for joining us on Unbelievable. It's been an absolute corker, frankly, with soon-to-be Dr. Samuel McKee and Dr. Stephen Law. Thanks for joining us. Tune in next time. From me, Andy Kind, and everyone here at Unbelievable, goodbye.